A warm welcome to the Magpie Circle Podcast. And the person we've got on today doesn't come much bigger, at 6'3" tall. Jason Lee, a very warm welcome to the Magpie Circle. Delighted to have you on board and looking forward to delving into your career and also your application to be the PFA Chief Executive Officer as well. So, Jason, a very warm welcome to the Magpie Circle.
Good morning, Paul. Thank you. I mean, listen, first thing to correct you, depends on what day, good day or bad day. 6'4" or 6'3", but I always like to say I'm 6'4".
It's a running joke with my statistician for this show. Whatever we seem to produce is never quite right. Kevin Nicholson slaughtered us for missing some of his goals and his appearances. But
if you're going to go off Wiki, you know, Wiki's not always factually correct, is it? Let's be honest.
This was 11 v 11. That's supposed to be quite good, but we've already worked out that we missed off one of your goals and gave you one extra yellow card. So anyway,
well, we'll get into that.
We are that because that is a story and a half. I think what we can agree on: over 600 appearances, 100 odd goals, a boy from East London. You've done well for yourself, haven't you? When you look back on your career.
I think so. I mean, if someone says to you at the beginning of your career that you're going to have 21 years as a player, you play across all 4 divisions, you know, you'll score 100 plus goals if you're a striker, 600 plus games, and these are just league games and league goals, including cup games and that. I think you would take that, wouldn't you? It's not easy. I speak to a lot of young players about where their career may or may not take them. So it takes a lot to stay in the game. It's not just about talent. You know, I remember being given an opportunity at 16. I came into my scholarship a little bit later than the rest of them. And I wasn't attached to any club before. I had some trials with Millwall. It was always going to be Millwall or Charlton that I would sign for. And I chose Charlton. But, you know, a lot of players, especially now, when you see they're going to the academy system, under 8. So incredibly early to go into a football environment. But I didn't come in professionally until I was around 16. Although I was playing and having a go, I just never got that opportunity until I was 16 years of age.
It's an interesting point you make there, Jason, because when I've been in and around professional football for a long time, and you can often almost spot the players that don't come through an academy route, that come into professional football a little bit later. I often find they're kind of more rounded and more grounded because they haven't been part of that kind of football bubble, like you've just said, since the age of 7 or 8, and you get 1 or 2 more life skills.
It's hard to get it right. I mean, I've coached at Notts and at Forest, you know, in the academy, Centre of Excellence. Notts was the Centre of Excellence, Forest is an academy. And there's a terminology and everything involved in that. I've coached, you know, most age groups, and I also coach men and managed non-league with Boston United. So in terms of young players and dealing with parents and expectation, it's a really big thing. You know, I've been an academy coach, manager, where you're having to have those difficult conversations and say to young children and parents that they're not going to move on to the next stage. It's usually every 2 years or every year they get evaluated. And, you know, as I said, if you're going to come in at under 8 now and survive and get to like 16 and then get a 2-year scholarship, you've done incredibly well. I mean, I spend a lot of time with young players and I always congratulate them, you know, if they've earned a scholarship, because I know what they're about to go through to get to that stage. And this is what obviously the general public might not fully understand. And then you get a 2-year scholarship, which in my opinion is a professional contract, because from 16 onwards, you could play in the first team. Mm. You know, you could play senior football. I made my debut at 16 and a half for Charlton. So that just shows you, you know, there's Theo Walcott, there's Wayne Rooney's of this world. You know, you can get an opportunity from 16 plus. So physically you might be mature, but mentally obviously you're not. So there's that, you know, there's all those little things to think about. So anybody that makes a career out of the game, no matter how long they play from 16 plus, has done extremely well.
You had a long career spanning all 4 divisions, which you've mentioned. Let's just drill down into your Notts County career, which was 2 years at Meadow Lane. Towards the end of your career, How did you end up at Notts?
Oh, I was delighted. I'm not going to lie. I was relieved. I wanted to play for Notts many, many times over the years.
Really?
People might not understand that. Yeah. Listen. I was born in East London, and I wanted to play for Leyton Orient because that was my local club. And yet I used to drive past Leyton Orient to go to Charlton, through the Blackwall Tunnel, South London. And you'd always think, well, it's like everything. You think, well, why doesn't my local club pick me up or sign me? Because surely they know what I'm about and where I'm from. So with Notts, I just ended up commuting and going all over the country, anywhere. I came to Nottingham to sign for them across the road, which you don't want to talk about. But, I came to Nottingham. That's what brought me to Nottingham. And, a young family and my wife, and we just loved the place. And I made a conscious decision, or we made a conscious decision at a very young age, that we were going to settle there, and I was just going to commute to wherever I needed to get to, because one of the biggest traumas in football for families, and that is actually relocating and having to go into new schools and new houses and new properties. So in my early career, I had to deal with that. I was renting, I was buying. I had some really quick moves, to get to where I got to. But with Notts, I should have signed from before, probably a year before.
Yeah.
I was leaving Boston, and it ran its course there at Boston. Well, I enjoyed it, and I scored goals, and I was playing really well. I was leaving, so I actually remember coming over to Notts. It was around Christmas time. Yeah, it was around Christmas time or January, and having a conversation with the club and discussing the possibility of me. And it would have only been to the end of the season, but for me, that would have been an opportunity to come and play for Notts County. I scored against Notts County as well, that season for Boston at York Street against Notts County. Had a really good game. Kelvin was playing at the back, Pipey, this, that, and the other. You go that little bit extra, didn't you? You want to show people what you're about. And I was all over the place. I remember, and I was like, there you go. This is what you need. Bring me in. I'll help the club. I've still got it. I was always somebody who looked after myself physically anyway. So, age is just a number. But in football terms, people can be really disrespectful and assume that, from 30 plus, you're over the hill and you've got nothing to offer. So I was hopeful, and we had a conversation, and the director of football, Howard, I'm going to throw him under the bus, Howard Wilkinson, who I've known a long time, and he would have known me a long time. And his advice to the manager at the time would have been, and was, he's too old. It's not about resale value, but I fully understand he's too old. Go and get a younger striker. So that deal fell through. So I ended up going to Northampton, which wasn't a bad drop back. I had options. I went to Northampton. Strangely enough, within weeks, in my first game for Northampton, played at Meadow Lane. Obviously, I'm up for it again, because you should have signed me. And now I'm playing for Northampton, who are challenging for the league that season, for the title. And I get injured. And it was a really strange injury, quite innocuous, where somebody lands on my foot and my ankle, and their whole weight goes through my ankle, and I twisted my ligaments. So it was quite a serious ligament injury. You get graded 1, 2, or 3, and I think it was a 2. And it took me ages. It took me months to shrug it off. Honestly, months. So I only played a handful of games when I first went to Northampton. But then I got back, and shocked, my first game back was against Notts County. Down at Sixfields for Northampton. So up for it again. I scored a winner. It's kind of fate, the way things work. It was fate. I scored a winner. My ankle's heavily strapped. It's one of my first games back, but you get through on adrenaline. So yet again, I'll score a goal against. So that's 2 in the season, home and away against Notts. And I'm thinking, well, I'm out of contract in the summer. Come on, what more can I do, sort of thing. But yeah, Steve Thompson, who I've known a really long time, played with him at Charlton. As I say, I was a young player, playing in the reserves, made my debut in the first team. Steve Thompson was the man, was obviously a centre-half, coming to the back end of his career. He left, had a few moves, and then he ended up being player manager at Lincoln. And then obviously I went to Lincoln, through trust and knowing Steve, knowing Tomo really well. Played for him, really enjoyed my time there, really grew, maturity-wise, physically, mentally. Always said to him that I would play for him again. Over the years, you always meet him and see him. There's certain people that you've got a lot of time for. Barry Fry, got a lot of time for him. I know his Marmite, played for him twice. Great individual. Character. Steve Thompson, different character. Always respected him and always treated me well and showed me respect as well. So that always stayed with me. And there was a few chances over the years and wherever he was, would I come and play? But it just didn't work out. So anyway, he got the Notts County job, and then it took a little bit of while, To be fair to Aldershot, this is something that you may or may not know. Aldershot came in really, really quickly. Was conference at the time, aspirations of getting into the league, this, that, and the other. They came in really, really quickly with a really good offer. So I'm at Northampton. I'm hoping that Notts County will sign me or anybody else. But Aldershot come in with a great offer, and they could have done more to accommodate me. You don't have to commute every day, don't have to stay down there all week. 2-year contract, they'll look after me. So I thought, well, that's on the table. And I signed it probably as soon as the season finishes, pretty much. I signed it like not a pre-contract, but you pretty much sign the papers. Now it would be a pre-contract. It wasn't in those days. But so I signed the contract. Then weeks later, Tomo gets the job at County.
Yeah.
And his first phone call is to me. What you doing? Come and sign for me, blah, blah, blah. And I'm thinking, I've just signed for Aldershot. And I mean, I've done the media and everything down at Aldershot. It's a really big deal for them. Did the media, Terry Brown, great guy. They did nothing wrong. And then I'm having to get on the phone to Terry Brown and say, that contract we signed, can we void it, sort of thing? No chance. Listen, at the end of the day, there's been no money paid. There's no foul, no harm, no foul. You've got to understand that I've got a chance to play for a club on my doorstep or commute and deal with, travelling to Aldershot. This is really what I want to do. So, we had the conversation. To be fair to Terry, he was like, okay, I understand, but I'm not sure if the club are going to allow this to happen. So then we went through a process with the FA. Notts County signed me, even though I'd signed for Aldershot, and we went through a process with the FA to just see if we could actually renege and get out of this agreement, which we did. At the end of the day, it was no point going down any legal route. And that, what are you going to do? You're going to bring a player who doesn't want to come and play for you. So we got them in the end, but I fully understood, and I did apologise publicly to Aldershot, and I can imagine it must have been a little bit embarrassing. So I got the opportunity to finally sign for Notts County, his first signing. And I think there was only probably 2 or 3 other senior professionals at the club, and Mike Edwards, Pipey, and probably Pilkington.
Yeah.
Kevin Pilkington. I'm not sure if there was anybody else, but so it was a total rebuild of players. So that's how I ended up coming to Notts.
Very, very good memory, and you're exactly right, because Steve Thompson came in and there were literally something like 4 or 5 players left, and he had to build and assemble an entire team and squad almost from scratch. And you were
no youth team.
And you were kind of almost...
No youth team, no centre of excellence.
Yeah, no. It had all been disbanded. The club had a lot of financial issues coming out of administration, ownership, part owned by the trust. So money was very, very scarce. And it's a debatable point whether the club's ever fully recovered back to where it used to be before 2000. In the ensuing 2 decades, you were kind of the main man coming in, and it led to your highest goals return in your career in a season with 16 goals. Things went pretty well for you at Notts. I presume you enjoyed especially that particular season, yeah?
As I said, I've been waiting to play for Notts County for a long time. And to get the opportunity, as I said, I would have liked it to have happened earlier. And I know when I signed, there was a few people that thought, we're signing a 35-year-old here. Somebody who, what are we going to get out of him? What's he like? And I signed a 2-year contract. I was adamant because I'd been offered a 2-year contract at Aldershot. And I wouldn't have signed a 2-year contract if I didn't believe I could play. I ended up playing until I was 41. I wouldn't have signed it. And it wasn't about the money. So I signed a modest contract for 2 years, just to ensure that it worked. And I worked extremely hard that summer. I went away on holiday. My kids and my wife always used to laugh. I'm a person who would get really bored quickly anyway on holiday and would end up going for a run, play tennis, whatever it may be. I'm not a person who's going to lie on my back and enjoy the sun that much. So I worked extremely hard that summer, and I thought, you know what, when I get back pre-season, I'll make sure I'm where I want to be, as opposed to trying to catch up pre-season. So I went into pre-season, no injuries, worked extremely hard. We knowing Tomo really well, I helped him in terms of some of his recruitment. We brought in quite a few Boston players, people that I knew that I played with at Boston, who I trusted, Alan White, Austin McCann, left back, Laurie Dudfield. Pretty sure that was it, but that was enough. And there was other players who I knew from around that lower level as well. So, we recruited really well, I think, quite well. We worked with the budget. We got a really competitive team, some good youth and some experience, because you want to give yourself a chance in your first season as a manager and make sure you get the right experience. So, myself being a senior pro, he knew that I'd help lead the change room alongside, Eddie, Mike Edwards, who's been a great stalwart for the club. So, that's how it came about. So, delighted. I made sure I was in the right place. The season started, I wouldn't say on fire for me, but I was consistent. When I played, when I was on the pitch, and I say that, because we're going to get to it, I contributed with goals, but my game was never built on being the sole goal scorer in the team. So I wouldn't say it was a surprise, but I can finish, contrary to what people may think. I could finish, but I always play generally in a team where I would have added responsibilities, which people don't understand. So I would spend half of the game chasing centre halves back for long throw-ins and corners and set pieces. And then obviously I've got to get up the other end and give, that offensive threat as well. And also I was very unselfish, I believe, throughout my career, and would benefit from having a greedy striker, or a striker who wants to get in behind and, benefit from flick-ons and my hold-up play. So the goals was coming. My strike partner would change, whoever it may be. But I enjoyed that responsibility. I took on the added responsibility. I contributed goals. And as you've alluded to earlier, I picked up more than my fair share of bookings. But, the bookings, to be perfectly honest, this is when I knew I was coming to the end of my career and it was a new game and how the game's changed. My bookings were they were embarrassing. Honestly, they were embarrassing. There was players feigning injury. And I'm the first to hold my hands up. If you're going to get booked or sent off, I've had some great red cards that, I'll own them and say, yep, proud of that one. But to be getting booked for, simulation, and it is a hard job for referees, they would buy into it. Even though I was captain, you'd think being captain would give me a chance to maybe, talk to the referee and get his ear. But I felt like even for a referee, maybe it was a little bit of an ego thing. And I booked Jason Lee today, and it's like, it was just embarrassing when I look back. I was never close to getting a red card. I was disappointed with the officiating, and I was also disappointed with my opposition, because as a big centre half, which generally they are, for them to be falling over and feigning injury I thought was really embarrassing. So the running joke throughout that season was, scored another goal, well done, picked up another booking, and we had to put a case to the FA, because when you reach a certain threshold of bookings, the FA come knocking at your door. And obviously explain myself, and I'm trying to explain that, well, if you look at them, they're hardly worth it. And I actually got a red card, believe it or not, but not on field, retrospective red card against Brentford. And the manager of Brentford at the time was Terry Butcher. I'll never forget it. So, as I said, that was my red card through the season, but not on field. So what happened is we played the game. I went up in a challenge with a centre-half, young centre-half, headed the ball through, caught the centre-half as I headed the ball through. We went and scored, all in the same movement. No booking, back to the centre circle. What's the problem? Kick-off. Centre-half went off injured. You know, that was the price he had to pay during the move. He went off injured. And then nothing. I heard nothing from Terry Butcher or Brentford or anything. But during the week, we get a letter, and then we're having to go into conversations with the FA. Retrospectively, they looked at the clip, the video, this, that, and the other, and they decided that that was a red card. So I got obviously a suspension, retrospective, you know, after the event. That really disappointed me, because I think Terry Butcher was screaming down the phone to the FA, this, that, and the other. You know, their centre half, he was injured, he was out of the game, blah blah blah. I'm thinking, this is Terry Butcher, the same guy who had the headband and the blood and played for England. And if he was that angry and aggrieved, surely he would have just said something to me at the game or after the game, you know, because this is the way we are. And I would have understood that, but I didn't hear anything from Terry Butcher or anybody. So it wasn't in my head when I left the stadium that, oh, guess what? You know, you're going to be suspended and pick up a red card. So that was the way the season unfolded. Really, really strange in that respect.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting about Terry Butcher, because I think when Notts were in the top flight and Justin Fashanu was playing for Notts, I think it was Terry Butcher's tackle that caused Justin a lot of problems with his knee, and ultimately led to his retirement. And irrespective of whether that was Terry or not, Terry could dish it out, you know, and you would kind of expect that sort of trade-off, yeah, between
100%.
pros understanding the way that you work, you know.
Yeah. No, I get that. And when you say, you know, like Sam Allardyce was obviously manager of Notts County, and I'm playing for other teams over the years. And I've known Sam a long time, when Sam was manager of was Blackpool, and I was at Lincoln back in the day. And so Sam always knew what I was about. That's why I was saying over the years, I was always hopeful that I would get an opportunity to play for Notts County, whether it be Sam Allardyce, whoever it may be. So, but me and Sam would always have a running battle. You know, certain managers, like Neil Warnock, you know, certain managers, I've spoken to a lot of players who have played for them, and they said how great they are to play for. And I thought I would actually fit straight in with them. So when I was on the opposition, you would always hear the managers trying to influence the game and their centre halves, and, you know, that Jason Lee's doing this, and ref, have a look at him. And I'd think, wow, you know, we're talking about Sam Allardyce. I remember what you was like as a player back in the day. And I'm listening to you, and it's a little bit embarrassing, you know. So these people that you kind of hold in high regard, I wouldn't say it was tainted, but I was a little bit disappointed sometimes. But that's the game, you know. Managers will always try to influence the officials and try to get at, you know, the decision making on the field. So yeah, there were some real characters.
Just to put into context, because I couldn't really believe it when I was looking at the stats and everything. In that season, when you got the 16 goals, you went sort of 1 for 1, getting bookings. So 16 yellow cards in a season. I mean, that's. I mean, I don't know whoever keeps these records. That has got to be up there. 16 in a season, got to be up there with an all-time record. I don't know who keeps these records, but I mean, phenomenal. And yet you've mentioned the Brentford story, but the minutes you must have been on a yellow, but you never got a red. So game management was clearly good.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I knew in my earlier career, I really used to cross that line. You know, I would react to all sorts. You know, if anybody wants to do or say something, I'm not even waiting until we leave the field of play. Let's get it sorted out. So that was just the way, you know, that's the way of the game. That's the way we played back in the day. And it sounds like, you know, I played in black and white, but I was kind of brought up on that mentality. You know, I was brought up on being a physical centre forward, and I would never complain. You know, I only won 1 penalty in my career. I tell this story to people, which people don't know. As a centre forward who's played all those games, you can't tell me I never got fouled in the box. I can tell you so many times where, ref, that's a penalty. But no, half a dozen, or, you know, you get that sort of comment all the time. And because you're a big lad, Just get on with it. So I always adopted that. You know what? Dust myself off. Never going to complain. Just going to get on with it. But I only won one penalty in my career, and that was right in the, in my younger age. I'd have been about 19 or 20 at Lincoln when I won that penalty, but I never got a penalty throughout my career. So I just thought, there's no point me complaining. I will just play through it and manage the game, as you said, and try to ensure that, I'm not a liability. And, getting a yellow card at any time during the game puts you on the back foot. And especially, I think sometimes I was picking up bookings in the first half. So there's a big decision to make. You're a big integral part of the team. Now you've got to curb your enthusiasm a little bit, which was I always thought that was one of my strengths, was my enthusiasm, my endeavour, I was always going to ensure that the centre halves never had a comfortable game. I learned that at a really young age, that it doesn't matter how I'm playing, whether my confidence is high, whether I feel great physically or my technique's on point, just ensure that centre half has a really uncomfortable time. So, no free headers, or if they got a header, they would always feel me. Goalkeepers would always be wary if I was in and around them. And I just thought that, I had to manage that because, as you say, when you're on a yellow card, anything can happen. You can end up getting sent off. So, yeah, I'm quite proud of how I managed that, but I'm not proud of the fact that I got 16 cards that season.
So what was Tomo like on the club with you when you keep picking up these yellows? I mean, was there a fine code at that time for certain types of yellow, or was it, Jason, don't do that again, or were you picking up a few fines here and there from the club?
You pick up a few fines here and there from the club, but yeah, again, it depends whether the club back you or they actually think, you deserve those cards. So a lot of the time, when we looked at it and this and the other, the club backed me. I mean, I remember even Howard was in on some of the analysis and this, that, and the other, and God, that's harsh, and you've been unlucky there. And it's like, well, what can you do? Do you know what I mean? I'm entitled to challenge for the ball, and if you challenge for the ball and the centre half feigns injury, you're going to pick up a card because there was no VAR. The referees are going off what they see. Sometimes they're going off what they don't see. They catch it a little bit later where maybe a player falls over and they think, well, you must have done something then. So, Tomo was great with me. Tomo understood. Tomo was an old school centre half, lots of splits and this, that and the other. And he understood the code, and I think he loved it, to be fair. I thought he was great. It sent a message to maybe the squad and younger players, that I was still dedicated and hungry, and it would have been hard for anybody coming behind me not to put in that same level of effort. I would have ensured that they couldn't do that as well. I was club captain, shared responsibility with Eddie. I was team captain as well. Yeah, you have to lead by example, and unfortunately, that picking up bookings was just part and parcel.
It was a season. And you would be aware of this. I think Steve was very unfairly judged by a section of Notts fans, because that was the first season where we'd not had relegation, threats, challenges. We were could have mounted a bid for playoffs, halfway, steady season. And given you'd started that season with only 3 or 4 players, had to sign a whole new squad, I thought it was a decent season, and the finishing position was something like the best either side of Steve for about 6 or 7 years. But he never. I think he got a little bit tainted from the first spell there with Colin Murphy, Smurf, as we all know, great character, Smurf, great character. But I don't think he ever really got the credit that he deserved. You had some good characters and some decent players in that dressing room. Alan White, this is his shirt. Alan, yeah, very large. It even fits me, this shirt. David Pipe as well. And do you remember? Well, I know you remember, but at the time with my business, I got the contract to promote and PR Under Armour, which at that point was a brand that no one had really heard of. And they were out in Baltimore. So I was doing all the stuff. The only player at the time that was wearing it was Bobby Zamora. He was like an ambassador for it. He used to wear the stuff with the little logo Under Armour under your shirts. And so I remember speaking to the owner, Kevin Plank, in Baltimore. I said, "Oh, my team always supported them. It's Notts County." I said, "Never heard of them." I said, "Well, I'm not surprised." And I said, "We're the world's oldest professional football club." I said, "Could you get some gear, black and gold?" Yeah, because you had to match the kit up. He says, "Yeah, sure." He said, I'll send you a ton of stuff over. So he sent all this base layer, and he used to have those gloves. You remember the gloves? And so I came down. Yeah, I spoke to Tom. I said, "Yeah, bring the stuff down for the lads." And we did the photo shoot with you, Pipey, and Alan White. And you got all the gear on, hadn't you? I tried to find the photos and I can't find them. And there's you like that with the gloves on and everything. But it was good, and I could do a little bit. And not all the players were there when I brought all the stuff down. And the following day at my office, 2 players knocked on my office door in the centre of town. Jay Smith and Nacho Montoya. Yeah, and they're not still. We weren't there. We haven't got our gear. Can we get something? They come to the office, give them a load of gear. So it was quite funny. But some of those, they were decent players, good character, and you've still got some of that gear, haven't you?
Yeah, I've still got some of that gear. I don't throw anything away. I'm not going to lie. I've got bundles and bundles of gear, shirts, training kit. Now and again, I do actually have to get rid of some to make space, but some of it's good to keep. And that gear that you mentioned, the Under Armour gear, was really strong wearing and long lasting. So listen, the underlayer stuff has become part of the game now. It's synonymous, but you've got some stuff for the summer, which is a little bit lighter, thinner. You've got the winter stuff, so that stuff was really, really good to wear. But no, I really appreciate that. I think Pipey did as well. Not every player, is comfortable wearing any Under Armour or any under clothing under a shirt. They get too hot, this, that, and the other. But for me, it was perfect. It did the job.
I mean, Pipey, David Pipe ended up doing some modelling for Under Armour. This is an unusual conversation to have, but Pipey's physique was unbelievable, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was his hobby, and it wasn't a bad hobby. Everyone's different. There are some players with incredible shapes. Some people really have to work at it. Some people, have got a natural, genetic breakdown, and they are real specimens. But I don't know what Pipey was like as a child, but I know that the day that I came in to Notts, he was always in the gym. He was always doing extra, and he lived the right life. He didn't touch any alcohol. He ate the right foods, and you can't knock somebody for that. He was quite enthusiastic on the field as well, right? Overly enthusiastic. He used to charge in, and so we had some good characters. He was playing wing back that season, and he got some assists from my goals as well. He was flying up and down. I was struggling to keep up with him at times. He would break really quickly, and it was perfect for me because, as a number 9, you want to be in the box, and you want wide players to actually get up and down and deliver and put in crosses. And Pipey was he was quick, he was strong, he was enthusiastic, and he was dedicated. So, fair play to him. But yeah, we used to laugh. We used to laugh at him all the time. He loved his shape. And why not? He got a few tattoos to show it off. And if you put the work in, you got to show it off, haven't you?
Pipey did, didn't he? And another lad who I thought was a really good character, and you already mentioned a role that you played in bringing him into the club, was Alan White at centre half, because he was kind of old school centre half, wasn't he?
Whitey. I mean, as I said, I wouldn't say I was the main factor, but when managers, they generally ask players, what do you think of this player? What do you think of that player? Or who gave you a hard time? Who's this? Who's that? Whitey was one of these guys that he would argue with himself getting dressed in the morning. He was that sort of character. And I played against Whitey so many times over years, and I loved it. I used to always look forward to it. Like, this is going to be brilliant. We're going to have a go. It's going to be back and forth. It's going to be banter. It is what it is. Whitey gave as good as he got. some people didn't understand Whitey. You know, some people thought maybe he might have been a little bit of aloof or whatever it may be, but he just wanted to win and he wanted to do well, and he didn't suffer any falls. So great centre half to have in and bring in alongside Eddie, Steady Eddie, as everybody calls him, Mr. Consistent, never go up, never go down. I wish he would have went up a few more times, but Eddie was a great lad as well. So them two playing alongside each other was a good combination, because Eddie was cool, calm and collected. Whitey would be the one who would be the enforcer. So good signing, good player to bring in. And I don't know if we got the best out of him or saw enough of him. And I know sometimes the fans didn't take to him, because I remember being in some games where he got a little bit of stick from the fans. But I think as a centre-half or defender, if you make a mistake, you just have to kind of try and play your way through it. And you're in a position, you know, in the back line where mistakes can be really costly. So, as I said, Whitey, I always liked Whitey. And when I managed Boston, he was one of the first players who I felt, if I can get him to come in and be my centre-half, that'd be great. And he did. He came and played for me.
I've been looking through the stats for that season, and one game that interested me was the League Cup, because you got through to the third round. And I think, as you mentioned, you were normally kind of rested by Tomo to get you in sort of pristine shape for each league game. But you played in the third round of the League Cup against Southampton. And I noticed in the Southampton team, a young lad, Gareth Bale. So there's Gareth Bale as a young lad playing at Meadow Lane. You scored in the game, but I guess, Gareth, at that point, no one knew who he was, really, did they?
Yeah, who's Gareth Bale? I mean, don't worry about Gareth Bale. You got Pipey, Jason Lee, and Mike Edwards out there. No one's worried about Gareth Bale. No, listen, they bought a strong team, because teams generally played strong sides in the cup competition, and there wasn't that real rotation and resting. Although I was rotated and rested, I think we beat Middlesbrough away from home in the round before. So I know, people would have been disappointed not to play in the Southampton game. But yeah, it was at home. There was no travelling involved. Tomo decided to give me a game, a midweek run-out, which I was really pleased about. I did score in the game. We played really well, deservedly. We won the game. So yeah, young Gareth Bale. There's always young players on their way up, learning their trade. And I would imagine for any young player, playing, even when they go out on loan, if you play against a good senior team with experienced professionals, that's where you're going to learn more about your profession than anything else. So, we've got development football now, under 23 football. I think that can be really difficult, because that's quite sanitised football. They're not playing against really senior players who 3 points and life and death sort of situations. You've got to put food on the table. So that's when it becomes real competitive. So it was a good game. They had to come to us. They knew they was in a game, and to be fair, from what I remember, I think they had Beard, who was one of the shorter centre halves at the back. I remember him early in the game thinking, could have done without this. It's a long trip. You could just see it in his body. You can see it in his body language, like, oh, what am I doing? And as I said, I always wanted to make it uncomfortable for centre halves. And yeah, we played well that day. Yeah, good result.
No, it was a good result. And I think if you look back at that your first full season at Notts of your 2 year, it's a lot of ticks in boxes, stabilised, had a successful season, decent players. You've got 16 goals, a few yellows here and there, but not to worry, into the second season. And I think kind of what I'd alluded to earlier, Steve was never massively popular. And of course, we also, not my cup of tea, but the club in the background, and I don't know whether the players were exposed to this a great deal or not, but you had the trust ownership who were never fans of Steve, based purely on what they judged him from several years earlier. And it was, for me, it was kind of always a decision that was going to be made as soon as a few results presented themselves. What did you make of that second season compared to year one?
Disaster. if I'm perfectly honest. The second season was a complete washout for me. As you said, we was aware that if results didn't go well, that Steve, might have to leave. Unfortunately, and really sad part of the game. And what didn't help, Tomo, is that I broke my arm really early in the season on the training ground. I've still got a plate in my forearm to this day.
Have you?
Yeah. It was when you consider all the things I've done over the years, all the people that I've made contact with, training ground incident with Chairman Toya. I remember going across him to shield the ball, calling with my left forearm across his forehead. Yeah, and it was like a piece of wood breaking. It was a really loud crack. And at the time, I was looking at Chandler. Are you okay? I mean, he had a really straight away, like a cartoon, a big egg formed on his forehead, and everybody was like, "Are you okay, Chandler?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm really sorry. Are you okay?" Blah blah. And then, not realizing, the pain just hit my arm, and you just think, "Oh, what's that?" Really painful. But I'd actually broken my arm. So I left. I had to drive myself. By the way. I had to drive myself to the hospital. Yeah, one arm. Drive myself to the hospital. Shambles.
So you're in Queen's Medical Centre, are you? Like in A&E, waiting. Arm like this.
Yeah, it was like that. It was, I had to go up to Queen's, whatever, maybe. Yeah, it was Queen's. I had to go to Queen's. Training kit, this, that, and the other. Wait to be seen, like everybody else, and get my arm looked at. And the X-ray came up, broken. I was going to be out for a period of time. It took me longer than expected to get back because the weight of your arm, which you don't realise when you're running, the vibration and the pain was constantly throbbing through my arm. So for somebody who's physical and throws his arms around and uses them for leverage, I was really vulnerable with that arm. So they had to make a special cast to fit over that arm to protect my arm, which some of the referees wasn't okay with. And once we wrapped the cast, it became bigger. So there was like I was actually wearing a tool, something else that I could actually use. Even though we wrapped it as made it as soft as possible, the cast was firm underneath. So it was whether the referees was going to be okay with that cast as well. So yeah, I missed a lot of games. Whilst I was out injured trying to recover, the results wasn't going well. I'm trying to be an influence in and around the change room. The results wasn't going well. And then, as you say, Tomo got the sack. And then it was just, from then, there was a cloud. I mean, Tomo offered me another year's contract because I was going to start pursuing my coaching career, which I was really looking forward to. It kind of brought the coaching on because I was out injured. I was able to get on the training ground, do some work with players and get involved. So I was really looking forward to that. I was going to sign a new contract as well, an extension. That all went out the window. The extension was gone. New manager comes in, new plans, new ideas. Everything just goes up in the air. And you know what it's like if you're going to bring in new people and start making changes mid-season, invariably it doesn't work out. So yeah, we was just chasing our tails from then, that decision to remove Tomo and then obviously try and rebuild the squad and make changes. And you always, as a manager, you always want to bring in your people, and because that's what trust is built on. So I was associated with the previous manager, like a lot of people in that change room. So, we was kind of deemed surplus, which was really frustrating because, as I said, I'd waited so long to play for Notts. I had a great first season, and the second season was a complete washout. I scored one goal in the second season. We had a horrible time, League and Cup, embarrassing time. I think we lost to Havant and Waterlooville in the FA Cup.
FA Cup 1-0. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just a really difficult, hard season. One that I didn't feel or didn't think that the fans really deserved, really considered. Notts has been through that so many times of having to fight relegation. And it was close towards the end of yet another. And I managed to get back and try to get myself on the field and help the team out. And Richard Butcher, God rest his soul, Richard Butcher, who Tomo brought in, was a phenomenal player. You know, phenomenal box-to-box midfielder. He'd scored similar goals to that I'd scored the season before. And that's from a midfielder. So we was hopeful that we would have built a team to really challenge and do well in that second season. But as I said, when you make changes, new personnel, things can go pear-shaped really quickly. So yeah, it was really sad in that respect.
I think, you know, Notts fans will say, and I'm sure many other clubs can say this, that the huge churn in managers, which leads to a churn in players, and so on and so on and so on, has been, you know, a very, you know, one of the principal reasons behind the club's challenges that it's had for the best part of 20 years now. You know, older fans like me would still, you know, were brought up and understood the club and watched the club as a side in the top two divisions of English football. That was a lot of it down to stability. Only two chairmen in 35 years, Jack Dunnett and Derek Pavis. And since Derek Pavis left the club, a whole succession of owners, an even bigger selection of managers, and an even bigger selection of players. And it's an expensive way of running a football club for a start. It's an expensive way of running a football club. And I guess you saw at first hand that in terms of year one, where you'd be hoping to build in year two, wouldn't you? You know, year one was kind of the challenge with all the players that had to be brought in a very short period of time.
Yeah. I think with lower league football, especially lower league clubs, players are on shorter contracts. So you know there's going to be a turnover yearly or every 2 yearly. And I think Notts were a club that was traditionally only offering out 1 year contracts, if that be the case. So that, you know you're always constantly rebuilding, and if that's how it's going to be. So there's no rocket science involved. You know, I know, you were kind of alluded to it. If you've got no stability with managers and players, how can you build? How can you actually develop a group of players that might be beneficial to the club going forward? And I always thought, and I did end up coaching when we reformed the academy at Notts. You know, to be fair to Chaz, in my Poland, he asked me if I would stay on and help coach. I thought, I want to develop. I want to work with young players. I'll do that. And I just thought it was absolute tragedy that Notts had to fold their academy when you consider some of the players that have come through. You know, some really, really talented players, a real hotbed. You know, the city's got great players, great young players. Grassroots is really strong. There's some real talent out there. So I was there right at the inception of developing, you know, and developing those relationships with the community again, and saying that, can we rebuild? Can we rebuild your trust? Can we, you know, get these players back in? All the players that are just going to Forest and, you know, wherever it may be, can you help us rebuild, you know, our academy, and maybe look at trying to get a conveyor belt of players into the first team? So, yeah, you know, the rebuilding process is not an easy one, but I just thought it was really difficult, especially for Notts, to have to keep taking those backward steps and always continually, you know, whether it be financial, whatever it may be, miss money management, bad decisions. I've always said, when people have asked me, what's Notts County about? You know, what's it like? I said, listen, it's just waiting for somebody and some people to grab it and take it to where it needs to get to. Fantastic stadium. And that stadium, you know, 20,000 seat stadium, you know, can be really difficult to play in when you've got small numbers, you know, 6 or 7, especially if things are not going well. Away teams always enjoy coming to Meadow Lane. I always enjoyed going to Meadow Lane because it's a big stadium. You get that feel, and also if it's a negative vibe inside the stadium as an away team, you enjoy that as well. So it was always that, you know, just elevating the club back to where it needs to get to, and, you know, currently where they are, you know, not being in the league is, wow, it's really tough.
Oh, it's heartbreaking, but equally, you won't find a single Notts County fan that won't say, actually, we deserve to be relegated. You know, that was the thing. You know, you can't really clutch at straws. Unfortunately, we deserved to be relegated as one of the worst two teams in that division. And I think Harrogate last year was a bitter pill to swallow as well. Harrogate were clearly the better team on that day, beat us comfortably. It's still a difficult one because we got ourselves back into a great position to get straight back. And every year you're down in the National League Conference when you were playing, it gets a little bit harder to get back, doesn't it? You know, it gets a little bit harder. I think we've got a reasonable chance this year. You know, you would like to think we would make the playoffs, but you know, it's a difficult one to look at Notts County as not being in the Football League these days.
Well, when you think about it, when you see Mansfield, you know, they've done well to bounce back, but not easy. Chesterfield, you know, still struggling to get back. You've got the Barn. It's loads of league teams.
Yeah.
You know, Barrow. You know, it takes clubs forever. You kind of go into that wilderness, and what people don't understand as well, you say it's a non-league, you know, step 5, but it's full time. They're
fifth division.
Yeah, it's a 5th division. They're professional teams. There are teams below that. You know, I manage that Conference North, and there are teams at that level who are full time. Honestly, at Conference North and South, there are teams who are full time and pay really good money. So it's not easy to drop down into that division. You become a scout, and to assume that you're going straight back up is pretty remarkable if you're able to actually do that.
Yeah.
Because if you're able to retain, I mean, obviously, if you get relegated, you want a clean sweep, don't you? The players that took you down clearly are not the players who are going to bring you back. But if you can retain some quality, or at least bring in the hungry players and the right players, then you might have a chance of getting back. But you've got a really good manager, you know, at present, someone who's really experienced and seems to have brought in players who are still dedicated and have that desire and actually want to help the team get up. I remember when I signed for Graham Taylor at Watford, and I was his first signing. So there's a bit of a theme, really, when managers decide they want to get in the first place. It's always an important signing because it kind of snowballs who comes in afterwards. And Graham was the same. He was saying to me that when he's asking me like why I would want to come and sign for Watford, and he told me why he wanted me, but he was interested in why I wanted to. I think as a manager, you got to speak and listen to that player and see if he actually has the endeavour and the ambition to help you get the club where they want to get to. There's no point bringing in players who are not really up for that fight. You know, same with Watford. They dropped out of the Championship down to League One, and we won that league that season because he brought in players who wanted to progress and wanted to be part of a journey. You know, you have to be part of that journey for the club. So for Notts to get the right players that want to be part of it and bring them back into the league and maybe move forward, you know, that's an important cog really for the manager. He has to get that right.
Your journey, you've been working with the PFA, and most recently, to bring this up to date, you are now standing to be Chief Executive Officer of the PFA. I've worked in the past with Gordon on the PFA Awards, and you know, I have a huge amount of respect for Gordon. And what he's done with that association over many years. So you've worked in the PFA for 8-9 years now. So talk to me about this next step that you would like to be considered for.
Yeah, for me, I thought it'd be remiss for me not to throw my hat into that arena, so to speak, because there's 2 other people that have publicly declared their interest in the role. I went on a journey, so like everybody, not like everybody, but like a lot of players, you know, I played, coached, managed, transitioned away from the game. And then, you know, for the best part of 10 years, I've been working for the PFA in administration. So I've learned about the politics involved in the game, working with all the different governing bodies and stakeholders, and understanding, or have a better understanding of the politics involved. And there was always this argument for players that when we leave the game, that we're kind of discarded and people don't see our value and what we can offer. So for me, you know, I encourage, not only myself, but I encourage others to to push themselves into these areas of governance. You know, I studied governance in 2014 alongside other former and current players. You know, Les Ferdinand would have been one of those, Darren Moore, Chris Hughton, you know, lots of people. And the idea behind that was that we would start to really see if we could influence the way the game shaped and be part of the decision-making process. So we can't have it both ways. We can't have people making decisions for us and complain about it without putting ourselves into that position, going away, getting the skills and competencies that we need to apply that. So, yeah, for me, you know, it's been close to 40 years that Gordon's been in position as CEO, you know, done fantastically well for the union over the years. If there was no PFA tomorrow, I think current and former players would really suffer going forward. It's important that they actually understand that. I think we take the PFA for granted a lot of the times, but they are really the last call. If a current or former player needs support outside of their club or when they leave football, it's going to be the PFA that they call. So I've dedicated myself really for the last 8 years trying to support current and former players, you know, whether it be discrimination, which has been my life's battle really, fighting discrimination, racism, but also, you know, education, ensuring that current and former players prepare for the next part of their life. Because if you finish the game at 35, if you're lucky, we spoke earlier, but I had a long career, but players leave the game at, you know, whether 18, 16, 21, 23, these are the cut-off points really, you know, scholarship, under 18s, under 23s, pick up an injury, don't have a long career. There's only a very small percentage of players who are financially able to leave the game. And if you consider at 35, won't really need to consider working again. The rest of the players, like everybody else, have to go out and get a job. So they have to prepare for what's next. So for me, I understand the importance of supporting our membership, our current and former players. And for me also, as I said, to be a leader, you know, I always enjoyed leading on the park, in the change room. I spent the last close to 10 years in front of players. You know, I think that's important, giving them something to identify with, you know, talking about various subjects. I wouldn't duck anything. If anything's asked of me, I'll answer it, you know, as honestly as possible. There has to be some realism attached to it. You know, what can the PFA do? We can't solve everything, but we are an important cog in the machine. You know, you've had this season, you've had, you know, the money where clubs wanted to, obviously, salary cap. You know, clubs wanted to, well, they actually went down that road and actually enforced that, which was a little bit premature on their part, but they did. We fought on behalf of the players to ensure that that decision got overturned. And it was important that people understand outside of football, it's not footballers being greedy. It's, you know, football players want to help and ensure that clubs are able to survive, but it's not the employee's responsibility to then start giving back to the club when the club should have managed their finances in a better way. It's not rocket science. Like any business, we've been talking about it. Don't sign players on contracts that the club can't afford. So even if you was to do the salary caps, this and the other, we're still not actually getting through to the clubs and the owners how they need to manage their business. It's a football club, it's a business. You need to, you know, put something in place that's going to ensure that you can actually run that organisation in a better way. So, you know, players, I would imagine, have learned this season. Now and again, the PFA has to flex its muscle and show people what we stand for and how we can actually help our membership and go against some of the other stakeholders and ensure that we can do the best we can for them.
I mean, one point that we've discussed previously is that footballers quite clearly understand football, you know, and in life, you know, I attach a great deal of emphasis to what you would call subject knowledge. If I work, you know, in sports PR for many years, I kind of think I understand that sector. And I think if you took, for instance, a PR person that had never worked in football or sport before out of government, parachuted them into sport, I think they would not be as good. Yet if you look outside of the PFA, there are very few former professional footballers anywhere in this pyramid. And I think, you look at perhaps at Germany that have historically brought on various players and taken them through administration and governance. But in England, there's a huge lack of former professional footballers in senior office. What do you put that down to?
I put a lot of that down to arrogance, to be honest. I think externally, people have a perception that footballers can't run their own business, which is not true. Footballers have outside interests. We have all the skill sets it takes. We're extremely dedicated. We're quick learners from a young age. To be professional, we work at the highest level and be professional and ensure that you're able to deal with the pressures that come with it. They're great traits. We're good in a team. We're able to work with people. So we go from coaching to management. We're able to manage. So to assume that footballers can't run an organisation is, I believe, very arrogant. So that's why I try to encourage and work with a lot of players to get them to think about how they can affect government or governance in the future and be part of that decision-making process. So, yeah, outside of the PFA, you might not get the opportunity to be part of governance. So this year is especially important that not only, that we elect a new CEO, but we've got a new players board, and there'll be a new chairman, and there's positions available for current and former players to be part of the process, to feel that they're part of it. So, this year more than any other, I'm hoping that, the media and especially the players really pick up on the fact that there's going to be some change. We need change throughout the whole infrastructure of football. We really do. And there has been a lot of changes. The Premier League have made changes, the FA, the EFL, CEOs have moved across all of those stakeholders. So there are changes to be made, but are they going to be changes for the better, or are they going to be the same changes? If we're going to make changes going forward, we need to, enforce that we bring in different people with different ideas, different enthusiasm, and something that they can offer the game. So for me, one of my strengths is going to be the fact that I can identify with current and former players, but not only just that. As I said, I've got a very good understanding of administration. I've worked alongside, been part of some really important conversations with all the other governing bodies, and just ensure that we are part of that conversation and that people are continually listening to what players actually want and what they need.
One topic that has been, I think, is now starting to be being researched much more professionally, is dementia and heading of footballs. And obviously the PFA recently brought in Jeff Astl's daughter onto a committee. Jeff Astle, born and bred in Eastwood in Nottinghamshire, he started out his career at Notts County along with Tony Haitley. They were in the same youth team, believe it or not, in something like 1960, 1961. Jeff's brother is a Notts County fan. I think there were Notts County fans growing up. Clearly that is something now. More research is taking place, and clearly, of course, you would have, on a purely practical level, headed the ball an awful lot. I mean, where are we going with that? What strides are we starting to make now?
I think the most important thing is that we've actually identified, and people are taking more notice of the fact that work needs to be done around that area. So I think it's a collective process where we should all be looking to support. There's concussion now where we talk about it in football. There's a protocol in place where players leave the field of play. That wasn't happening years ago. We've paid for and we're continually researching in that area. There's ongoing studies with former players as to their cognitive responses and how they are coping after leaving the game, because we don't know really until we leave the game the long-term effects of heading a football. Just like being a boxer, the ball does hit your head or whatever it may be at serious speeds. And there are modernized footballs, and back in the day the balls would have been heavier, especially when they got wet, and they would have been the issues that players are having to deal with. But again, reiterating the importance of the PFA, because whether it was researching in dementia, we've got a wellbeing department, we have benevolent. We ensure no matter what the ailment is, you know, whatever the injury is, you know, I have players calling me all day, every day, especially players who have left the game, who have got nowhere to turn. You know, they may well need a scan or an operation or wellbeing support or whatever it may be. And we're able to offer them that service. So, you know, dementia is something that we know we're going to continue to invest in our time and efforts and ensure that players, you know, get the best treatment they can going forward. But more interestingly, you know, I'm not sure how we get around dealing with dementia. People have spoken about maybe not heading the football so much in training and at an early age. But I think also, because I know when I was coaching, you have to ensure that you're teaching the correct technique as well. Technique's important. There are young people heading footballs with really poor technique. You know, if you've not got your body in the right position, if it's not hitting the right part of your head, you know, simple things that people might take for granted. You know, the balls shouldn't just be hitting you. You should be, you know, attacking the ball. You know, that's semantics, isn't it? I'm getting into, you know, stuff that people probably don't want to hear about. But these things are important. It's like if you're training to do something, you need to have the right training and ensure that you're protecting yourself in the best possible way. So yeah, there are heading drills that I would have done early in my career that you just couldn't do now. You know, just being out there for far too long, heading balls, whether it be into the wind, against the wind.
Yeah.
So there's things that you look at. The old school techniques, they've been modernised, and I'm hopeful that, you know, going forward, that maybe the next generation, the generations to come, might not attribute or suffer with some of the issues that we're talking about.
You also mentioned, you said your entire lifetime has been spent fighting discrimination. And clearly we've had Black Lives Matter over the past 12 months. You would have, I'm sure, had to cope with significant challenges on an ongoing basis throughout your career. And then, of course, there was also the retrospective debate that came out with your haircut, wasn't there? With Baddiel and Skinner. Where do you think we are in those conversations now? And, you know, what more, or where would you like the PFA to move or continue to develop on?
Well, regarding discrimination, you know, whether it be race or homophobia or whatever it may be, I mean, for me, as I said, I've always challenged people's perceptions and ideas. So I work in education. I'm more than happy to work with people, because people always reiterate, you've got to educate, you've got to help people understand. You know, I get that as well. But also, you've got to check and challenge certain behaviours. I think for far too long, a lot of people might avoid that issue, those uncomfortable conversations. I think we've been in a space during lockdown and BLM with taking the knee or whatever it may be, that it's been probably very difficult for people to get away from it. You know, if we was busy with our normal lives, things might not have been in the public eye for so long. But the conversation I'm having, whether it be with family and friends, you know, whether it be with other stakeholders, people who are showing more appetite to actually have a better understanding of what we're talking about. You know, racism's always been there, unfortunately. Discrimination's always been there across, you know, a number of different areas, as we spoke about. So it's ensuring that the PFA is on the front foot. And, you know, we put various studies together. We did a study with One Repeat around racial bias within commentary, something that I always felt that from a young age, terminology, language is important, you know, unconsciously. And we've all got biases as well. Not many people will actually admit to that, because people are scared to say, you know, I've got a certain view or a certain opinion. We've all got biases, but if you actually have a conversation and feel safe in that environment and not get, you know, piled upon, usually when you say something that goes against, especially through social media, people will just, you know, jump on you and it becomes something else. So you've got to be able to have those uncomfortable conversations to be able to learn where people are coming from, understanding people's different race and religions. So for me, the PFA has been on the front foot. We did a report with Run Repeat around racial bias within commentary. We've also published a report with Signify around social media, the online harms. You feel like you're pointing out the obvious, but if you don't collate, and you're from a media background, if you don't collate data and put this information in a black and white for people to look at, it's easy for people to dismiss your conversation or your argument. And so what we've really focused on is trying to collate that information and hand it to people and show people, look, this is what we're talking about. We're not making it up. Here's the evidence. Now let's see how we can shape that. Educationally, I do a lot with broadcasters, media, just around language, just so that they've got a better understanding. Because once you do or say something online or in a public space, it's kind of there forever, isn't it? And it's very hard then to kind of backtrack, and it can have a really negative impact, on your personal life and probably your career going forward. So I just, the fact that we're all more mindful is due to the fact that we're in a period of time now where people have to be very, very conscious of how they address, being negative, whether it be racism, homophobia, or any form of discrimination. So, I'm hopeful that we'll get the messages out there, continue to check and challenge people, and maybe move the conversation on.
Because the PFA is a very broad church, isn't it? So, you have young players now coming through, 16, 17, 18, who will then become household names if they're at a Premier League club by scoring a goal on one Saturday. Yeah. And the following week, they're a big name. They're a big name. That brings with it a lot of pressure. But I think if you look at Marcus Rashford, Marcus is kind of harnessing at a young age the ability to massively social influence and deliver a result that perhaps young players in your era would not have been able to achieve that kind of level of public debate and a result at the end of it. So players themselves now potentially can have a lot more influence, can't they? That's one of the plus sides.
Yeah, extremely proud of Marcus Rashford, let's be perfectly honest, what he did. And through his own personal experiences, that's where his passion comes from. So generally, a lot of the things that we fight for, we can relate to, which makes sense because you've got a better understanding of what you're fighting for. But you touch on it. Public figures, sporting icons, famous people, they've not always stepped into the political arena. And people always say, there's no room for politics in sport or football. Well, politics is around us all the time, all day, every day. People are making decisions for us. I go back to what I was saying earlier about footballers stepping into governance and being part of the decision-making process.
Exactly.
We are part of it. And, football can be a force for good. It can change. We have a lot of positive role models who can help a lot of people. And simple things like taking the knee, when players are taking the knee, they're doing it for a lot of people. They're doing it for people who haven't got a public profile. You're fighting social injustice. So people have to understand that when players are stepping out of their comfort zone and talking on these subjects, that it's not an ego trip. They're doing it to help society and help a lot of people who haven't got that same platform. So we need to back them. Marcus received some negativity around it, which just shows you where we are sometimes. How can you receive negativity? We're trying to ensure that, young children have got food in their bellies and lunches, continue their education and go to school. It was a really good thing what he was doing. And lots of footballers give up their time. Lots of footballers have got charities. The stuff you don't hear about, you always hear about the negative stuff. But social media can be a force for good, but can also be extremely, really volatile and really be a bad place because, anybody and everybody has got an opinion, and it can show up on a timeline where it's not meant to be negative, it's meant to be a positive conversation. Someone could just throw in their negativity. So it's addressing social media as well, which we've tried to ensure that we're continuing that fight. It's not easy. You're dealing with a real global force. You know, they're financially really strong, the social media companies. So to tackle them, just the PFA, is not going to happen. But we feel that there's going to be a buy-in from government and all the other stakeholders, and collectively we can really push forward and maybe close some of those walls in on social media and address some of the things that we're talking about.
We wish you every success in your candidature, Jason. Is this something that's going to be sorted 2-3 months? Is this kind of like a year-long process in terms of the CEO progression?
It won't be a year long. I would imagine the CEO and the new players board would all be ratified by our next AGM. So we're probably talking by the end of this season. There'll be new positions, new people in charge of the organisation, and we'll move forward. So no, it can't drag on any longer. We've been in a state of flux since 2019, really, when Gordon said that he was going to step down along with our current chairman, Ben Perkis. So yeah, those decisions are happening. There's obviously interview processes to get through. But yeah, for me, it was just about raising awareness around that, making people aware, because people do move into positions and people don't really understand how that happened. You know, what happened, what was the process involved, what could they have done to support or get involved. So yeah, for me, that's where we are now. Well, I would imagine in the next month or two, we'll know, who's stepping into those areas.
Okay, I'd also just like to finish, because a former Notts County player, Alan Judge, was involved. Well, it's an unusual one, isn't it? Referee Darren Drysdale, and of course you must have had brushes with referees, and we'll come on to the Collina story in a moment because I love that story. I hope we could tell it anyway. So you've done various assessors and travelled around the country with games. You've clearly had brushes with referees down the years, and they've brandished quite a few of these yellows at you. Did you have a take on that? Was too much made of it? What was your thoughts? Because Alan himself Alan Judge wanted an end to it. He didn't want to take things any further as such, did he?
Yeah, see, that's a tough one, and you can say it's because of the era that we was brought up in and this, that and the other. And I remember referees used to swear and all sorts of, you'd go steaming and you could swear at the referee, he would swear at you, and you'd think, you just go, whatever. You can't swear on a football pitch now. You can swear to your own teammates and this, that and the other, but if the referee deems that you swore at him or said anything disrespectful to him, you're getting sent off. So the respect levels of the game has gone up, 100%. And the situation you're talking about with Judgy, where they come together, and it wasn't a headbutt. I mean, let's be perfectly honest. They came together and the referee stood his ground. And yeah, I do stuff with the Premier League and PGMO around assessing the officials. And I'm not sure the officials should back down or step back when a player steps towards them, because, they're judged on their temperament and how they manage the game and how they manage the players and what respect levels are involved. Do the players respect you? I think you need to mark your card early in the game as a referee or anybody, if you're a teacher, coach, whatever it is, to show people that, I'm forceful, I'm in charge of this game and I'm going to manage this game. So you don't want to see, which you've seen, referees being chased by players. One, the players shouldn't be chasing the referee, but the referee shouldn't be backing off and running around the pitch.
Yeah.
That shows a weakness straight away, right? So he stood his ground. And when you speak and when you consider Alan Judge has tried to defend him and said there was nothing, he's tried to help him. The PGMO looked at it and thought, well, we maybe have to set an example, which I feel sorry for the referee in that respect, because, he's going to be suspended and going to miss a game and has to come out and publicly apologise. I just think that puts them under even more pressure, referees have got a tough job. I never thought about it when I played. I hate referees. I thought referees are just a complete waste of time. But I've learned, since, doing my current, one of my current jobs, assessing the officials, how difficult it is for them to actually work in that public space. And, you've had Mike Dean, who had to be arrested because he was receiving death threats and all sorts. the well-being of individuals and referees or anybody, it's not easy. Being an official in a public space like that, people really do get carried away with themselves, honestly. They go far, too far and overly critical. And when you threaten somebody's life, that's taking it to a whole new level. So, no, not good. And you mentioned, to allude to Collina earlier, I had the pleasure of playing on a football pitch. With Collina refereeing the game, and if people don't know who Collina is, they could Google him. He had less hair than me, believe it or not. Collina was always. I've never seen Collina with hair. He had the big eyes, tall, athletic, lean guy, but very animated. He would always be there, right in front. He would be getting involved in any skirmish. Physically move people out of the way. I'm the boss. I'm in charge. Issue a card, and there would be very few people who would go up against Collina, because you'd think, I get it. It's Collina. Once you know reputationally that he's in charge of the game, but once you get out there as well, you would have that respect. So I'm not sure. I mean, I know he's an assessor and he works with referees and that now. So it'd be interesting. Maybe we should bring him over to the Premier League and over to England and let him work with some of our officials. But we know globally the game is perceived, and you play in different countries, and you do have to adjust how you actually play the game because of the referees. Their temperament is different. But yeah, Collina, had the pleasure of playing against him, and surprisingly, at the end of the game, he asked me for my shirt, which was strange. The first and last referee, and I was chuffed. I gave him my shirt, and I thought, wow. I would never give a shirt to any other referee when you consider the amount of time they got booked to this, that, and the other. But when you consider he was considered, or is considered one of the best referees to actually manage a game of football, yeah, I was quite pleased, to be fair.
So just to set the scene, you were playing for the other lot over the river, European game, yeah?
Yeah.
You've played the game, and so what? Yeah. Pierluigi sort of just came up to you at the end of the game in the tunnel, or knocked on the dressing room door?
You leave the field of play, you shake hands, don't you? You say, well done, blah, blah, blah. And he was, your shirt. And I'm thinking, really? You're asking for my shirt? A bit strange. I'm like, yeah, cool, it's no problem. When we get in the tunnel area, I'll give you a shirt, not a problem. So, yeah, I gave him a shirt. I'm sure he's got some fantastic shirts over the years. And I'm not sure, if he's still got my shirt or what he's done with it. But, listen, as I said, he's one of the icons of football. So
you didn't ask for his shirt, did you?
That's the thing. I didn't ask for his shirt. I mean, I think once you've seen one black shirt, you've seen them all, right? So, no, it wasn't for me. And he wouldn't have had his name across the back, so it could have been anybody's.
That's a great story. I love that story. And, on the subject of referees, a good friend of mine is Howard Webb. I'm sure he must have booked you at some point. And I think it's a big loss for English refereeing, but the English game, that Howard's over in the MLS. The MLS recognise Howard's talent, and he basically runs all the refereeing setup over there, trains them, runs the VAR. I've got to say, the VAR in MLS operates, in my humble opinion, heck of a lot better than it does over here. But Howard, was at the top of his profession, wasn't he? World Cup final ref, you name it, he's done it, and he's kind of over there. I think that's a big loss to the British game.
Yeah, well, we spoke about personalities, and he was quite imposing, wasn't he? Quite thick set. Had a really good manner about him. Was cool, calm, but imposing. Knew when to step in with players. It's getting it right. It's not easy. Listen, to be a top-level referee and work at the highest level, it takes a long time as well for them to get there. I think if they identify somebody at a young age, maybe they'll help him and support him along the way. But there's always been the argument as well that there should be more former players who become referees. And that's something that we've always tried to push at the PFA. But the problem with that is you would have had to have left the game as a professional player at a very young age to be able to get through all the years. And we've been asking for a fast-track system for former players. And you can imagine that the PGMO and former referees, they don't really want to accommodate a fast-track system to help us. But that would be the only way that we would be able to get in former players. I mean, Tony Law, my former Notts County player, striker.
Yeah, that's right.
Really good friend of mine. Really good friend of mine, was my strike partner at Lincoln back in the day. He progressed really far with his refereeing. Also, Martin Carruthers, somebody else, former player, worked in Notts County. I believe he's still working for Notts now.
Ian Richardson went down the route. He ref me Sunday morning. Ref me. So Rico turns up one day to ref. Hello, what are you doing here? So I'm reffing your game.
Exactly. So these players have really pursued it. They've put the time in. They've done the grassroots of Sundays, but then they've got disillusioned. It takes them far too long to get through the steps to earn a living out of the game. I mean, unless you're a Premier League referee, you're not earning any money. You need a day job. Forgot his name. It was something Baines. Forgot his first name. Steve Baines.
Yeah, I know. Ex-Chesterfield, wasn't he? He became a league.
Yeah, I was playing for Chesterfield. And he was a former Chesterfield player, and he'd come in and train with us, and he'd be managing. I mean, he'd be refereeing games. He was he was still a full-time referee across the leagues, and he was training with us. That couldn't happen now. You can't show any association or affiliation with a club. You know, it's also hard to be a referee or one of the arguments that I'm saying for former players is that you have an association with teams. So how are you going to referee those teams? Well, then you got no chance, have you? Because players will have some sort of association with football clubs. So there are obstacles, I believe, that are making it very difficult for players to step into that. But we are going to continue those conversations because people always throw up. And when I'm doing analysis and I'm looking at stuff, the reason they want former players looking at it is because we can give that opinion and we can see stuff that players are doing in terms of cheating and simulation and stuff that referees don't actually quite pick up, tricks of the trade.
Yeah.
You know what's happening on the field of play. But some referees, they just don't get it. You know, so yeah, refereeing is, I don't know, it's not for everybody, and it takes a long time to actually progress to the top levels.
Yeah. But I think it gets back to the point earlier. It's about specialist knowledge, you know, and no one has more specialist knowledge of football than the people that have played the game professionally, and be those professionals going into refereeing, governance, owning clubs, advising, being in governing bodies. They have a supreme base of knowledge. I mean, if you look, I don't know, in other sports, athletics, you know, Seb Coe. Yeah, Seb Coe was an athlete and has then gone all the way through. Cricket is quite good at bringing cricketers through the system. In rugby union, you would see players going through the system. But it kind of seems in professional football, which is ultimately the biggest sport in the world, professional players kind of just end up being pigeonholed in their own union. Certainly that would be the case in Britain. And I do think, you know, diversify into those other fields, because your knowledge, working knowledge, is greater than everybody else's.
Of course, and when you talk about understanding the game, I'll tell you something, a lot of current managers and players, they actually don't understand some of the rules, like the rule changes every year. I'll be part of these meetings where you'd have to go in and we would obviously observe the officials speaking to the players in their squads, in their environment, and they have to explain the rules. And the rules change, they deviate slightly every year. So we're always kind of reinventing the wheel. It's a simple game, you know, whether you're coaching or managing or refereeing a game, it's a simple game, but there's always a different terminology that people, and these are non-football people that create this new terminology. And you always think, I'm really frustrated by this. And it's hard for, you know, Sam Allardyce and some of the stalwarts of the game who have been involved, because they're thinking, it's still the same game. And yet, you know, we're going through different decisions that you've seen it after a game. People can't even explain some of the decisions. They can't. And they hide behind a rule book, you know, chapter this, that, and the other. And you think, well, it's kind of, I don't know. I think we overcomplicate a lot of areas, and it probably keeps a lot of people in work, because, let's be perfectly honest, the decisions that a lot of officials are making at the moment are still no better than years before. And VAR, that's, you know, supposed to come in and help them. You still got human error because you've got people looking at VAR making decisions. So it's still interpreted by, you know, interpretation. So I don't know. We just complicate the game, but it could be a lot simpler. It's a lot simpler. We can simplify it, but I just feel that every year there will be always rule changes, and whether they're better than the way the game was back in the day, I really don't know if I agree with any of that.
Yeah, I think one of the modern challenges is everyone is subjected to so much scrutiny, aren't they? And so if a rule change is made or something happens, then, common sense. Common sense is not a commodity you see a great deal of these days, because it's easier not to do common sense. It's easier to follow the rule book, isn't it? Because then the person assessing, marking, whatever, is going to turn around and say, "Oh, you made the right decision." And I sometimes think that people like Collina, Howard Webb, you've mentioned it, man management, ability on a pitch, interpretation of a rule is one part of the job, isn't it? Shouldn't be the entirety of the job.
I think if you look at a decision over and over again, sometimes I have to look at decisions. Obviously, I see it in live speed at the game when I'm assessing the officials. But then I have the luxury of actually looking at a clip over and over again during the break and at the end of the game, and then maybe when I get home. As you said, the scrutiny. I always feel if you have to look at a clip, more than 3 or 4 times, then there's doubt. Clearly there's doubt, so you shouldn't really be calling it. What we do is we go in and we look at a decision over and over and over again, and also we slow it up. And we spoke the other day about the frame, how the frame can move on. If people get the frame right and the speed, between the camera and obviously by the time it actually gets to your TV screens, things move on. So we tend to overanalyze, and then we find something that may or may not be there, but we wouldn't have seen the human eye. Correct. The game was best when it was about the human eye. I made a mistake when referees would just hold their hands up and say, "Yeah, I made a mistake today." It is what it is. Now there's no, referees will reluctantly hold their hands up. You can't speak to a referee after the game. It's them and us. It becomes really difficult in that situation. So, and there are a lot of livelihoods involved. The managers will get extremely frustrated by it, but the human eye is something that we should have always stayed with. But there's so much money involved in the game that we decided to bring in technology, which to some extent I understand, because I think it works with tennis. But I just think with football, it doesn't work, because in tennis, they're a different crowd as well. People will accept decisions. Players might kick off a little bit, but if it's just a line in, line out, that's not a hard one to get wrong. But in football, when you're having to wait for goal celebrations and things like that, there's just lots of things that happen in that you just don't enjoy. You just don't enjoy that. There's a goal scored, the goal's going to be reviewed, so you don't want to get carried away. I mean, what's that all about? If you can't even enjoy a goal, which is the best thing, which is what you all, aspire to, is to win a game of football and to score a goal. But that's been taken away. So, yeah, I wouldn't have enjoyed playing in today's day and age. I'm not going to lie.
Well, you couldn't have got too many more yellow cards than you did in that season at Notts anyway. But, Jason, thank you very much indeed. It's been very revealing. I hadn't fully appreciated kind of your desire and enthusiasm to play for Notts. I wasn't quite aware of that backstory, and clearly, the highest number of goals in one season for your career at Notts. That's great for us. But I have to say, I don't think that record of yellow cards in one season, and I stand to be corrected, I think it must be a world record for Notts County, most number of yellow cards in one season. I've got it down as 17. I think you only had it as 16. And we've got to add in a retrospective video read as well. So, I mean, crikey.
Oh, dear. It's not something I'm proud of, and maybe I should have kept that back, not told you that. But as I said, sometimes I'm too honest. I thoroughly enjoyed my time at Notts. It was what I needed. And I'm glad I was still able to do myself justice, really. It would have been great if I'd have played for the club younger. But, things happen when they happen, don't they? I would never sign for the club if I didn't feel I could do myself justice and offer something. So, fantastic club, always looking out for Notts results. And You know, when you consider you've got two big clubs in that city, you know, you just want to see the best for both of them.
Absolutely. Well said, Jason. Thank you very much indeed. We wish you all the very best in the candidature for the PFA as well. We'll be watching out for you there. Jason, thank you very much indeed for taking the time to join us.
Thank you. Have a good day. Cheers, Paul.